Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's stories I'm going to talk about a seemingly impossible challenge where many people failed, just to sort of highlight some deeper points that I quite often talk about in my healing. So this happened yet again back in New Zealand. I'm still doing early stories in my career. So I was quite well known as a healer amongst the local community back then. And this case involved a good friend of mine who was also curious of spiritual things and psychology and consciousness in general. We used to converse a lot, and she confided in me at some point that she was having, I'm not sure if I can say this word on YouTube, but it's spelt R-A-P-E. So that was happening in the astral, or if you like, from some people's points of view, ghosts were doing that to her nearly every night, I think it was, or if not every night. And that was her experience. And she was obviously terrified and not a comfortable experience, wasn't getting good sleep. And she had been to several different healers already, and different psychics, and done all sorts of different things, really, in the alternative community with healers, psychics. And even though some of them gave her some comfort emotionally, the aura felt a little bit better after the session, or gave her some good pointers, nothing really was seeming to work. And the RAPE in the night was still happening. And so, I thought I'd lend a hand. I was still quite a new healer. I'd had some experience of entities and different shenanigans that entities or ghosts or astral entities, whatever you would like to call them. Yes, some experience of that and helping people with that and helping solve problems with that. And at that point I'd already worked out that, one method doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So anyway, I had to go all the different healing techniques with the aura, with the intention of changing the vibration of the aura so that she didn't attract so much of that. And again, very similar experience to the other healers and psychics she went to. She felt a little bit better in the aura, but the things kept on happening in the nighttime, unfortunately. So this was a good example of something where I couldn't help someone, at least not straight away. It's quite possible that if she'd had enough healing and changed her vibration of aura enough, then she wouldn't be attracting those sorts of entities, or that reality wouldn't be so real for her. So that's something that I did experience with people later on in my career, where you can do enough healings so that the vibration is changed enough so they're not attracting that anymore. Or another way of looking at it is that the astral isn't reflecting back at her that reality. But in this case, we didn't really get anywhere with healing. It just didn't help. So what did help? Well, we talked a lot about different spiritual concepts, about what Eastern mystics and traditions would talk about. Things that the Buddha supposedly mentioned as well. And very simply, what she did in the end was simply watched, let it happen, didn't fight it, because she'd tried plenty of times in the past to fight it and use clearing statements and throw energy back at them, try and fight them in the astral with weapons and all sorts of different things, flames, all the different methods that people in the New Age mention about. And yeah, you can seemed to defeat them every now and again doing that sort of method, but the more fight she put in, she realised seemed to get rid of some entities, but then more would come. Or the same ones would come back. So it didn't really help in the long run. So basically she just watched. She let it happen to her, the RAPE, and just tried to be like most people are taught in meditation, to be the observer of what's happening. So you're not ignorant of it, you're not hiding away and burying your head and let it happen and try and ignore it. You're fully aware of what's happening, but you're trying to watch it as if your consciousness is outside of the situation and watching it. So she let it happen. And by the way, this was very real for her. You know, all the sensations were there, all the physicality, all the touch, all the smells, everything there in the astral. All the imagery as well, of course. So very, very real, very uncomfortable thing to happen, of course. So yeah, that can be quite hard to observe if you're going through those sensations, going through that experience, of course. So yeah, she watched it and it didn't seem to do much the first night or two. But as she kept sort of getting better and better at watching the situation, letting it happen, not fighting it, watching the emotions come up and just letting those emotions be there, letting those thoughts be there, and just trying to observe it. She started to notice that, you know, it wasn't quite so severe anymore. It wasn't quite as horrific as the other times in the past. So she kept going, night after night, observing, and she noticed that gradually, as the days went past, as the weeks went past, that it happened less and less often, and that there were less and less entities. And she noticed also that some of them were getting angry at her, and especially if they didn't manage to RAPE her, they would be very angry, try and curse her, try and say things that would make her be fearful, trying to get her to engage again, trying to get her to fight back. All sorts of different tricks to try and get her to fight and blame them and make them really bad. And so she kept watching. And of course, some nights she was better than other nights, and some nights she fell for the tricks. But as she kept watching night after night, as the weeks went on, eventually there was no more RAPE. They were very angry and trying to do things to her, and again trying to get her to fight back, but she just kept observing. And I think she was also questioning, you know, especially during the daytime, well, if I'm observing and things are getting better, then, you know, am I not part of the creation of this? You know, she went through all sorts of different perspectives and different forms of questioning. Staying curious, in other words. Curiosity, very, very powerful, by the way, with healing. So yeah, again, more nights went past when they were quite angry, trying to threaten her, curse her, and make it seem like things would be bad in the afterlife, and so on and so on and so on. And gradually they weren't able to touch her even. And again, as more and more nights went past, observing, it was harder and harder for them to even get close to her, even get close to Aurora. And they were getting further and further away, still trying their tricks to get back and make her angry and fight. And then eventually, I'm not sure exactly how long it took, but you know, it was probably over a month of just observing this. Gradually, they just disappeared. They were, you know, off in the distance to start with, and then eventually they no longer appeared at night time at all. So this is a story I quite often tell people when they're going through some really rough times, and they've tried all sorts of other healers and psychics and all sorts of different techniques and contract cancellations and clearing statements and affirmations and all sorts of different things. And this is one of the stories I quite often will tell them. And it goes back to very, very deep teachings. Essentially, everything around you, not just in the physical world, but in the astral, is a creation. And whether or not you are the original creator doesn't really matter. You are taking part in it. You are agreeing to that reality in one way or another. And some of those creations are from other lives. So from her point of view, this was something because of a past life, because she said that she thought she was, in a past life, a concubine of some sort in Egypt. So, yeah, these entities thought, because of that vibration held from that past life, that, they could just come and take her. That was her point of view. That's the conclusion she came to of the cause. Yeah, she started to realize, if I fight them, that's really giving them what they want. If I'm fighting them and blaming them and judging them, I'm lowering my vibration. My aura is of a lower vibration, a denser vibration. It's much easier for them to interact with me then. It's much easier for them to be in my reality and to do that sort of thing to me. From another point of view, you could say that she stopped feeding them. So I've seen all over the internet, from what my wife quite often watches with different demon type things, from a religious point of view as well, that a lot of entities literally feed off your fear, literally eat it up. You're creating it in your aura, in your field, and they're just going, And so by being the observer, not fighting, not fearing them, because that's what you're learning to do when you're watching your emotions, watching your thoughts, watching the situation, you're no longer generating emotions and thoughts that maintain that problem. The emotions might still come up to clear, of course, and the thoughts might still run through your mind whilst you're starting to observe, but you're not generating anymore. And so you're not feeding them, you're not helping create the environment that those lower vibrational beings like. And so they starve, and then they go elsewhere. And if enough people do that, where no one's feeding them, then obviously they cease to exist, at least from our point of view, from our perspective. Yeah, very, very powerful technique, the observation technique, which I've called it in many other articles I've written. And this is why I also really like people to do the Goenka form of Vipassana, because that's basically what you're doing. You're learning to become the observer. You're learning to be okay with what your physical body feels like. Learning to be okay with the emotions that are coming up, the thoughts that are running through your head, and by extension, the things that happen in the astral, if you're aware of it, if you can feel it or see it. You're learning to become the observer. You're not hiding from it. You're not ignoring it, which is what some people think I'm trying to tell them when I say that, things are only as much of a problem as you make out, and that they're not inherently real. I don't want you to ignore them, because you're just going to get harmed that way as well, because you still believe that they can harm you. So it's just burying your head in the sand and still getting bitten on the bottom whilst you're doing that. So acknowledging it, observing it, but not feeding it. And it takes time. So sometimes these words won't make sense until you do that form of meditation and understand, okay, that's how it feels not to feed that reality. That's how it feels to not add energy to that creation. Okay, I hope the story has been useful for you. It's a very important example of reality and how we can maintain things and how we can clear things just by not feeding things. If you've got any questions about this, feel free to email me or comment below. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.